military spouses, how do you deal with rumors that start in the neighborhood? The whispers started 3 weeks after my husband Marcus got deployed to Germany. I'm Tessa, and I've been a military spouse for 6 years, so I know how base housing gossip works. Usually it's harmless stuff about who's having marital problems or whose teenager got arrested, but this was different. I first noticed it at the commissary when Kendra from 2 streets over saw me in the cereal aisle and immediately turned her cart around and walked away. Then, at the school pickup, Noelle stopped talking mid-sentence when I approached the group of moms she was chatting with. The weird looks and sudden silences continued for days. At the base gym, conversations would die when I walked into rooms. Even Cassidy, who I'd been friends with since we moved here, started giving me one-word responses to texts and avoiding eye contact during our usual morning jogs. I finally cornered Alana at the mailbox and asked what was going on. She looked genuinely uncomfortable and said she'd heard some concerning things about me but wouldn't elaborate. When I pressed her, she just said I should probably talk to Marcus about it and hurried inside her house. That night, I called Marcus in Germany, but he seemed distracted and tired. I mentioned the weird neighbor behavior, and he just said, military wives can be dramatic and not to worry about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The rumors escalated when Cole from the housing office knocked on my door Tuesday morning. He said there had been complaints about disturbances at my house, loud music, and parties late at night. I told him that was impossible since I'd been going to bed by 10 every night and living alone. He seemed confused and checked his paperwork twice. Said the complaints were specific, mentioning dates and times. But every single date he listed, I'd been home alone watching Netflix or reading. I showed him my TV viewing history on my phone as proof, and he left looking puzzled. That's when I started paying closer attention to what people might actually be seeing or hearing. I set up a motion camera in my front window, pointed at the street, and started keeping detailed notes about my daily activities. For 3 days, nothing unusual happened. Then on Friday night, I was woken up at 2 in the morning by my own music playing downstairs. Not just any music, but the specific playlist I'd created for house parties back when Marcus and I used to entertain. I crept downstairs and found my stereo system on. Volume turned up loud enough to wake the neighbors. I definitely hadn't turned it on. I'd been asleep for hours, and I'm not a sleepwalker. I checked all the doors and windows, but everything was still locked from the inside. I turned off the music and went back to bed, but I barely slept the rest of the night. Saturday morning, I checked my security camera footage from Friday night. What I saw made my blood run cold. The camera showed me, or someone who looked exactly like me, standing in my own front window at 1:47 a.m., dancing and holding what appeared to be a wine glass. But I knew with absolute certainty that I'd been upstairs asleep at that time. I watched the footage 15 times, trying to figure out how it was possible. The person in the window moved exactly like me, had my same hair and build, even wore my burgundy robe that was hanging in my closet upstairs. I spent the weekend going through every piece of technology in my house, looking for signs of hacking or remote access. I found hidden cameras in 3 different rooms, tiny devices I'd never seen before, all connected to a network I didn't recognize. Someone had been watching me for weeks, recording my movements, learning my habits and routines. But that wasn't the worst part. Monday morning, I got a text from an unknown number with a video attachment, and what I saw in that video explained everything about the rumors and why my neighbors were treating me like a stranger. I noticed something was wrong about 3 weeks after Trevor deployed to Germany. My neighbors started avoiding me in the commissary. They'd turn down different aisles when they saw me coming. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Military life was lonely enough without imagining problems. The mom group that met at the playground every Tuesday was the first real confirmation. I walked over with my coffee, excited to join the conversation. Noelle, who lived 2 doors down, was mid-sentence when she spotted me approaching. She stopped talking immediately. The other 5 women turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. No one responded. Noelle gathered her purse and stood up. "We should get going," she announced to the others. They all nodded and followed her lead. I stood there holding my stupid coffee mug, completely confused. These were women who had brought me casseroles when Trevor deployed, women whose kids played with our dog in the front yard. Back home, I texted Brielle, my closest friend on base. We usually met for lunch twice a week. "Free for tacos today?" Her response came hours later. "Busy." I tried again the next day. "Everything okay? Haven't seen you in a while." "Fine." One word. From someone who normally sent paragraph-long texts with multiple emojis. The knock on my door came at 9 a.m. on Saturday. I opened it to find Tamika from the housing office standing there with a clipboard and a stern expression. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need to discuss some complaints we've received," she said. Her tone was professional but cold. I invited her in, my mind racing. "Complaints? About what?" Tamika sat primly on the edge of my couch. "We've had multiple reports of loud parties at your residence, specifically on the 7th, 14th, and 21st. I stared at her in disbelief. "Parties? I haven't had anyone over since Trevor left," She consulted her clipboard. We have complaints from 4 different households about music, yelling, and cars coming and going until early morning hours. That's impossible, I said. I've been home alone every night watching Netflix. Tamika's expression made it clear she didn't believe me. Mrs. Mitchell, this is a military community. There are standards of conduct expected of spouses. I grabbed my laptop. Look, I can prove it. My Netflix history shows what I've been watching every night. I pulled up the account activity. Sure enough, it showed me binging baking shows on all the dates in question. Tamika frowned at the screen. This doesn't prove you were alone, she said, just that the television was on. I felt a chill run through me. Why would multiple people lie about me having parties? Tamika stood up. I'm just doing my job, Mrs. Mitchell. Consider this a warning. Further complaints will result in housing review. After she left, I called Trevor. We had a scheduled video call in 2 days, but this couldn't wait, he answered, looking tired, his barracks visible in the background. Tess, everything okay? He asked, rubbing his eyes. I explained everything that had happened. The neighbors, Brielle, the housing complaint. My voice shook as I spoke. Trevor sighed. Babe, this sounds like typical base drama. You know how it is with the wives when husbands deploy? This isn't normal drama, I insisted. People are actively avoiding me, making up lies about me. He looked uncomfortable. Captain Micah mentioned something about this yesterday. Said I shouldn't worry, that wives often get dramatic during deployments. My stomach dropped. Your commanding officer is talking about me? He was trying to be helpful, Trevor said defensively. Said it happens all the time. Wives get lonely, start imagining things. I'm not imagining this, I said, my voice rising. Someone is spreading rumors about me. Trevor checked his watch. Look, I have to go. Try not to worry so much, okay? It's probably nothing. After we hung up, I sat on the couch feeling completely alone. My husband didn't believe me. My friends had abandoned me, and someone was systematically turning people against me. I walked to the window and looked out at the neat row of identical houses. Behind one of those windows was someone who wanted to destroy my life. I just didn't know why. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. I kept thinking about the party allegations. How specific they were. The exact dates. The multiple complaints. None of it made sense, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't crazy. Someone was gaslighting me, and I needed to figure out who before they succeeded in completely isolating me from everyone I knew. I woke up to my stereo blasting music at 2 a.m. Not just any music, the exact party playlist my neighbors had complained about. I stumbled out of bed in confusion. The volume was cranked to maximum. I didn't even remember owning these songs. My hands fumbled with the power button as the bass shook the walls. The music cut off, leaving a ringing silence. I stood there in my pajamas, completely disoriented. I hadn't touched my stereo system in weeks. My phone lit up with an angry text from Noelle next door. Turn it off now or I'm calling security. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. I quickly replied that I was sorry, that I didn't know what happened. Her response was immediate. Stop lying. We can all see you dancing in your window right now. That was impossible. I was standing in my living room, not dancing anywhere. My blood ran cold as I walked to the front window and peeked outside. 3 houses had lights on. Silhouettes stood in windows, clearly watching my house. I quickly closed my curtains, heart pounding. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat on my couch until dawn, jumping at every creak and sound. Something was very wrong. The next day, I installed a motion-activated security camera facing my front window. I needed proof of what was happening when I wasn't looking. 2 days later, the camera notification woke me at 1:43 a.m. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking as I opened the app. The footage showed my front window with the curtains open. A woman who looked exactly like me was dancing in the window. Same hair, same build, same pajamas I'd worn yesterday. But I was in bed, watching this on my phone. I nearly vomited. Someone was in my house, pretending to be me, or worse. The video was manipulated to show me doing things I never did. I called the military police immediately. The officer who arrived seemed skeptical from the start. He watched the footage with a frown. Mrs. Mitchell, this clearly shows you dancing in your own home, he said. His tone suggested I was wasting his time. I tried to explain that I was asleep when this happened, that someone must have broken in. He walked through my house, noting there were no signs of forced entry. Have you been drinking, ma'am? He asked, eyeing an empty wine glass on my counter. It wasn't mine. I hadn't used that glass in days. After he left, I searched my entire house. Every closet, every cabinet, under the beds, behind the curtains. Nothing seemed out of place. Until I noticed a tiny glint in my bedroom ceiling vent. I grabbed a chair and looked closer. It was a camera lens, barely visible. My hands trembled as I unscrewed the vent. Inside was a small wireless camera, professionally installed. I found another one in the living room vent, and a third in the bathroom light fixture. Someone had been watching me. For how long? My skin crawled with violation. I collected all 3 cameras in a plastic bag, feeling sick. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. It contained a video attachment. I hesitated before opening it, already guessing what I'd find. The video showed Me, with a man I'd never seen before, in my bedroom, on my bed. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago, when I'd been asleep alone. The technology was sophisticated, a perfect deep fake that even I almost believed. This explained everything. The rumors, the cold shoulders, the housing complaints. I was still staring at my phone when someone pounded on my front door. I opened it to find Brielle standing there, her face twisted with anger. She thrust her phone in my face. "How could you?" she demanded. On her screen were screenshots from the same video. "Trevor is my friend too. How could you do this to him?" I tried to explain about the cameras, the deepfakes, the stereo. Brielle's expression shifted from anger to pity, the kind reserved for pathological liars. "You need help, Tessa," she said. "Everyone knows you've been having parties. We've all seen the men coming and going. And now this?" She turned to leave, then paused. Captain Micah warned Trevor this might happen, said deployment can be hard on some wives, said we should all keep an eye on you. That was when everything clicked. Captain Micah, Trevor's commanding officer, the man who told my husband I was being dramatic, who'd suggested watching me. I closed the door and called my sister Faith immediately. She answered on the 3rd ring, groggy with sleep. "Someone is setting me up," I said without preamble. "I need help. I need someone who will believe me." Faith didn't hesitate. "I'll be on the next flight," she said. "Don't talk to anyone else until I get there." I sat in the dark of my living room after hanging up, clutching the bag of cameras. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Someone wanted to destroy my marriage, my reputation, my life, and I was pretty sure I knew who was behind it. Captain Micah had access, authority, and apparently motive. But why target me? What had I done to deserve this? I checked every inch of my house again, finding 2 more hidden cameras. I left them in place. Evidence. Faith would be here tomorrow, and together we'd figure this out. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than confusion and fear. I felt angry. Whoever was doing this had picked the wrong military wife to mess with. Faith arrived the next morning with determination in her eyes and a small electronic device in her hand. She took one look at the cameras I'd collected, and her face darkened. "This is military-grade surveillance equipment," she said, examining one of the tiny cameras. "Not something you can just buy online." I felt a wave of validation wash over me. "So, you believe me?" Faith nodded, already scanning my living room with her device. "These transmitters have a specific frequency signature, only used by certain government contractors." We spent the next 3 hours going through my entire house. Faith found 4 more cameras I had missed, each one strategically placed to capture every angle of my home. "We need to check for fingerprints," Faith said. She pulled out a small kit from her bag. "I picked this up from a forensics buddy before flying out." The powder revealed partial prints on 2 of the camera mounts. Faith photographed them carefully with her phone. She had connections that could run them through databases without official channels. "Let's talk to other military wives," Faith suggested. "If someone's targeting you, they might have targeted others." I remembered what Brielle had said about Captain Micah. "Trevor's commanding officer seems to be behind this. He told Trevor I was being dramatic before I even told Trevor what was happening." Faith's eyes narrowed. "That's not a coincidence." I contacted Raven, the leader of the military spouse support group. She'd been one of the few people who hadn't completely frozen me out. We met at a coffee shop off base where no one would recognize us. Raven listened to my story without interruption. When I finished, she looked around nervously before leaning in. "This happened to Eliza Winters last year," she whispered. "Her husband was in Trevor's unit, under Captain Micah." My blood ran cold. What happened to her? Her marriage fell apart. Her husband believed the rumors. She moved back to Ohio, completely devastated. Raven pulled out her phone. She sent me screenshots of threatening texts before she left. The messages were nearly identical to what I'd received. Same phrasing. Same threats about exposing evidence of infidelity. "There's more," Raven said. "Captain Micah tried to date Eliza before she met her husband. She turned him down, just like you did 3 years ago at the Christmas party." The memory hit me like a truck. Captain Micah, drunk and aggressive, cornering me by the punch bowl. Me firmly rejecting his advances. Trevor intervening. The cold look in Micah's eyes afterward. "This is about revenge," I whispered. "He's been planning this for years." Faith contacted her friend Xavier, a military police investigator who owed her a favor. He agreed to meet us off base that evening. We showed him everything: the cameras, the fingerprints, Eliza's texts. "I've heard rumors about Micah for years," Xavier admitted, "but no one's ever had proof. Military wives complaining about a respected officer doesn't get much traction." Xavier examined the cameras with professional interest. "These match what we use for covert operations." And I recognized this installation method. He pulled out his phone and showed us a personnel file. Parker Daniels, tech specialist in Micah's unit, known for his electronics expertise. The fingerprints Faith had collected confirmed it was Parker who installed the cameras. Xavier promised to start an unofficial investigation immediately. "Be careful," he warned. "Micah has powerful friends on base. Don't let him know we're on to him." That night, I received an email notification that made my stomach drop. It was addressed to Trevor but had been sent to our shared family account by mistake. The email was from Captain Micah, containing doctored photos of me with different men. The message was calculated and cruel. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your wife has been entertaining guests while you're serving your country. I forwarded everything to Xavier immediately. This was the evidence we needed. Direct proof of Micah's involvement. My scheduled video call with Trevor was the next morning. I prepared what I would say, how I would explain everything. But when the call connected, Trevor wasn't alone. Captain Micah stood behind him, hand on Trevor's shoulder. Trevor's face was cold, distant. He'd seen the photos. I think we need to talk about what's been happening, Trevor said, his voice flat. Captain Micah has been kind enough to help me understand the situation. Micah's smile was barely visible behind Trevor's shoulder, a smile of victory. He thought he'd won. What he didn't know was that Faith was recording everything from her laptop, every word, every manipulation, every lie he was about to tell. Yes, I said calmly. Let's talk about what's really happening here. Xavier called me at dawn. His voice was tight with urgency. They'd obtained a warrant for Micah's home and office. We found everything, he said. More cameras, equipment for creating deepfakes, files on multiple military wives. I felt a rush of validation. After weeks of being called crazy, paranoid, and dramatic, I finally had proof. Faith arrived at my house 20 minutes later. Her laptop was already open to a collection of encrypted files Xavier had sent. She'd spent the night breaking through their security protocols. These go back years, she said, scrolling through folders labeled with women's names. At least 7 wives targeted before you. Each folder contained surveillance photos, personal information, and detailed plans for psychological manipulation. My folder was the largest, the most recent. He's been planning this since Trevor's deployment was announced, Faith said, pointing to timestamps. This wasn't impulsive. It was methodical. We found notes on my daily routines, which neighbors I trusted, which friends might turn against me fastest, even Trevor's likely reactions to different evidence scenarios. Raven texted that she'd contacted 3 other wives from the files. They all had similar stories. All had rejected Micah's advances at some point. All had been systematically isolated and discredited. He's done this to women who turned him down for years, Raven wrote, always during deployments when husbands couldn't witness what was happening. The military police called a meeting at the base commander's office that afternoon. I arrived to find Trevor sitting there, looking exhausted. He'd flown back from Germany overnight. I'm so sorry, he said immediately, reaching for my hand. I should have believed you. I wanted to be angry with him, but his face showed the devastation of realizing he'd been manipulated into doubting me. Xavier had shown him everything during the flight. The base commander, Colonel Reeves, entered with Xavier and 2 JAG officers. His expression was grim. Mrs. Mitchell, we owe you an apology, he said formally. Captain Micah has been detained pending court-martial proceedings. Xavier laid out the evidence they'd gathered. The cameras, the deepfakes, the systematic targeting of military wives, the abuse of military resources for personal vendettas. We found Parker in Micah's basement this morning, Xavier added. He's agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. Colonel Reeves looked directly at me. This is one of the most disturbing cases of psychological warfare I've seen in 30 years of service. The door opened and Noelle entered with Brielle and several other neighbors. They stood awkwardly by the wall, shame evident on their faces. We were shown the evidence, Noelle said quietly. We're so sorry we believed the lies. Brielle stepped forward, tears in her eyes. He showed us those videos and convinced us you were having affairs. We should have trusted you. I nodded, not quite ready to forgive, but understanding they'd been manipulated too. Micah had weaponized community judgment against me. The military police brought Micah in for the formal charges. He looked smaller somehow, his arrogance gone. His eyes darted around the room, finally landing on me. You ruined everything, he hissed. This was none of your business. I stood up, facing him directly. You made it my business when you decided to destroy my life, because I rejected you at a Christmas party 3 years ago. His face flushed. Everyone in the room watched as the truth of his pathetic motivation became clear. You installed cameras in my home, I continued. You created fake videos of me. You turned my friends against me. You tried to destroy my marriage. Xavier stepped between us as Micah lunged forward. 2 MPs grabbed his arms, restraining him. Captain Michael Micah, you are hereby charged with illegal surveillance, creation of fraudulent evidence, misuse of military equipment, conduct unbecoming an officer, and psychological torture, Colonel Reeves announced formally. The charges carried a minimum of 15 years in military prison. Micah's face went from red to white as the reality of his situation sank in. That evening, Trevor and I sat on our couch in silence. The house felt different now, violated but also cleansed. Every camera had been removed, every trace of Micah's intrusion documented and eliminated. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't found those cameras, Trevor said quietly. If Faith hadn't come, if Xavier hadn't believed you, I thought about Eliza Winters, whose marriage had been destroyed, about the other women in Micah's files who hadn't discovered the truth in time. We need to help the others, I said. The women who didn't get justice. Trevor nodded. Colonel Reeves is reopening investigations into all the cases in Micah's files, reaching out to the women and their families. Raven organized a support group for all of us, women targeted by Micah over the years. Some had lost marriages, some had lost military housing, some had lost custody battles based on fabricated evidence. Together, we built a case that would ensure Micah never harmed another military family. The testimonies were devastating, the pattern undeniable. 6 months later, I sat in a military courtroom and watched Micah receive his sentence. 20 years, dishonorable discharge, no possibility of parole. As they led him away, he turned to glare at me one last time. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. He had tried to make me doubt my own reality, tried to isolate me from everyone who cared about me. He had failed. The base community slowly healed. Friendships were cautiously rebuilt. Trust was carefully restored. The military implemented new protocols for handling complaints from spouses during deployments. Trevor and I had a lot to rebuild too. The doubt Micah had planted between us took time to uproot completely, but we worked through it together, stronger for having survived the attack on our marriage. Sometimes at night, I still check the vents for camera lenses. Old habits die hard.